Hey everyone, I'm Evan and I'm the writer and letterer for More Than Men. And first things first, More Than Men funded on day one. And I didn't know what to expect from this campaign. I fully anticipated having to struggle through it and just barely scrape by the end of the month. But day one, we funded. And it's been amazing. Honestly, it's just the love and support you all have given me and the rest of the team. And it's just so incredible to me because I really love this project and I love the story, and now thanks to all of you I get to share it with a group of people who have shown that they care too, and it's just such an amazing experience for me. Okay, so now that we're funded, what does that mean? Um, it means that I get to switch my focus away from trying to get attention to the comic and more towards what I really want to do, which is making interesting and at least I hope helpful videos for aspiring creators or people who are just genuinely interested in the comic making process. Because I don't know, I'm not really a fan of marketing in general. I don't like going out and saying, hey, buy my comic, share this to buy my comic. And I get that it's important, and I have been doing it. But I want to avoid that if I can. And now that we're funded, I can feel confident enough in the campaign that I can switch the focus to making videos that I really want to make. I want this campaign to be different from other ones in that it's not about me making money. It's about a community coming together and actually getting value out of it. And I want to provide something that is helpful for people. And so hopefully over the course of the month, the videos I'll be making will be helpful to you if you're interested in making comics, or just interesting in general for people who like to read comics. So what this first video is going to be is it's going to be me stepping through the first 8 pages of More Than Men issue 1, and I'm going to be going over our decision-making process for those pages, why we did what we did, why we laid things out a certain way, why I lettered things in a particular way, and hopefully that will give you all kind of a better understanding of the process and the thought process of making a comic, and hopefully any new creators out there will get some helpful tips and some new ideas. So let's get into it. Alright, so here's the first page of the comic, and in the first panel, what I really wanted to do, my focus was hooking in the reader, because with the first page and the first panel especially, your job should be, how can I engage the reader immediately with the story? And you want to hook them in, just like when you're writing an essay. The first sentence is the hook, something that's interesting that's going to make you want to read more, right? So I decided to open up with an action sequence, right? We're in the middle of a scene as opposed to starting at the natural beginning of a scene, which is actually how I laid out the book when I first wrote it. It opened up with a group of drug dealers sitting in a house, and this group here, these two guys, them showing up at the house, and then having the superhero team show up at the house, and then chaos breaks out. But that just took too long to get started, and really it wasn't important for the story itself. So instead I cut like 6 or 7 pages of really nothing to instead jump straight into the action and try and engage the reader. And so with this lettering here, this big foom, I placed it there for a few reasons. One, it's big and in your face, right? So it it catches attention right away, and it's a part of the hook itself. But also, paired along with this dialogue, I wanted it to be a clear barrier between these two types of characters, right? So one of the main themes of the story is a division between the powered and non-powered people in this world, and right away I wanted to express a few of the themes of the story through that. So the dialogue, not only is it meant as a hook, it's meant to be physically dividing these superheroes and the rest of the characters in the story. And that might not be super obvious, and it might not have a big influence in how you read, but I still think it's something that is interesting to express and is something cool to look at. And I also wanted to kind of show these characters being blocked in, right? So instead of opening up with our heroes looking all heroic and clearly being the good guys, I open up with more of a morally ambiguous sort of scene where they're totally blocked in here, seemingly ordinary citizens, just blocked in by the sound effects and the fire blast, and you don't really know who the good guys are going to be, right? And you have this guy with a kid, and they're scared, right? Scared of what? The cars, the people here, or are they scared of the heroes, right? So it's a little more morally ambiguous and goes along with the themes of the story. Something else that we had was, and this goes with, in general, with any kind of comic, is that you want to guide the eye in a very specific direction when you're through your panels, right? So the eye comes into the page, and you see the buildings are slanted this way, right? So your eye is coming in right at the top left corner, and you're slanting down, and maybe you're reading the sound effects and then the dialogue here, but then you're immediately directed down this way by the bright fire, right? It's the biggest, brightest thing in the panel, so your eye is guided to it, and it's pointing down here. It's pointing down directly towards this next panel, right? So the eye is guided in the direction that you want it to go, and that's going to be something that's important in all comics, right? Because if I had the fire going off here, for example, then the eye would be drawn in that direction, and you would immediately want to move on to this panel here instead of the actual panel that is next, which is this one. So it's something that's important to think about when you're laying out the interiors of your panels and the actual art itself, is that you want to guide the reader to the next panel. So, and we immediately bring out the dialogue here, which is right at the base of this fire. So you're straight into the next dialogue, because I want it to be a fast-paced scene. So there aren't a lot of breaks, not a lot of breath. It's boom, right into the dialogue here. And so let's talk a little bit about dialogue choice and characterization. So something that's also really important with a first page or a first scene is you want to set your characters. You want to establish who's who, what their motivations are, and what. So first of all, we have James, who's this more traditional, like, stoic character who's looking to help and protect citizens, right? And then there's Carson here, who is a little less careful and more wanting to capture criminals at whatever cost. He wants to enforce justice no matter what, and we can see that right away in the opening scene, right? He is just shooting out his fire, trying to stop this car at the cost of hitting innocent bystanders. And right away, James shows his opposition to that idea, right? And he counteracts Carson's fire with ice, right? He puts out the fire. at the cost of the car escaping, right? So we immediately get the two's priorities, right? James' priority is protecting people, whereas Carson's is catching the criminals. And that is something that continues throughout the story. And here's something small, a little interesting. Someone in my art group gave me the tip of, I originally just had this dialogue balloon here as just a straight long balloon tail, and it was looking weird and odd because it's not dialogue balloons. Like this one looks a lot cleaner because it's short range. It's right next to James. You can tell exactly who's talking and what. But what I had to do here was I had to have Carson talking in response to James' action in this panel. So the dialogue had to come after in the sequence. So what someone in my art group said, well, why don't you just add this little curve in it, the little lightning bolt, and it makes it more engaging to read, and it makes it feel more fluid and more dynamic. So that's something you can do if you need to force long balloon tails, or you can add a little something here to make it just a little more interesting. So something else that I want to point out, you can see that I bolded here. Let me zoom in. Certain words in James' dialogue, like careful, civilians, and I did that because a lot of more traditional superhero stories, you can look through like a Marvel comic or a DC comic, and they do that everywhere, right? They have tons of bolded words, and those words, they bold important words in the dialogue, ones that you should be able to read only those words and kind of get the message. So the dialogue here, be careful, Carson, there are civilians in the area. If you read careful, civilians, that reads, that gives you all the information you need to know, right? And I wanted, since James is more of a traditional character, I wanted him to have more traditional dialogue as well. Whereas you look at Carson's dialogue, his is not bolded at all. It's just regular dialogue. So something else that contrasts the characters. I also put a lot of sound effects because traditional superhero stories have just a whole bunch of sound effects throughout their comics. And as you'll see in a few pages later, that's going to stop. This first 3 pages are the only ones that have sound effects in the entire comic, and maybe even the entire series, I'm not sure. But I did that because I wanted to set kind of a tone, like, hey, this is a superhero story. There's going to be like superheroes and the sound effects, but it's not going to be a normal superhero story, right? It's going to be different in some way, right? Because you don't see like swearing like this in superhero stories, right? Let me review quickly guiding the eye through the page. Like if you zoom out completely, you can see the clear path through the page, which is through here. Then you follow James' arm shooting out the powers down here, and then you come back this way, following, and then out. Right? All right, here's page 2. So with page 2, I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to, one, continue to speed up the pacing because this is a high fast-paced action scene. So I didn't want to have a lot of dialogue. I wanted to have people be able to move through it pretty quickly because I wanted the reading to match the speed of the car, the speed of the scene flow, right? So, but the second thing I wanted to do was give us a chance to, even if it's very brief, get to know these two characters here. Because of what happens in the following panels, I wanted them to have at least some piece of humanity to them. And this comes from me originally having this big opening scene, an extra 7-8 pages of them just talking and getting to know them. And I'll explain why I want that in some of the later pages, but I think it's important to, if you're going to have characters have something happen to them, that you're only going to care if you know the characters at least a little bit, right? And so we start hinting at the personalities of the characters here. This guy is real nervous and jittery, whereas this guy's more stern and determined. And of course we got our little puppy dog. But yeah, so here's a big splash out panel of one of our main heroes. It's an introduction to our hero. So whenever you're introducing a new character, an important character, usually you want to give them a bit of spotlight, so that you can showcase, okay, this is a new person, someone that's going to matter, right? So here's a big blast out panel that bleeds all the way to the end of the page, and they're like the main focus. There isn't a lot to look at here. It's the car and it's this new superhero, right? And just this big explosive dialogue, right? So I put the red border around to kind of make not only the panel stand out, but the dialogue stand out too. So you can tell that this is an important moment, right? And the coloring works to reinforce that as well, right? So the brightest part of the coloring is right behind this character, right? And that just works to highlight this spot. The eye is immediately drawn this way. The reader comes down the dialogue here and is immediately drawn to this spot. So you can see this is the focus. This is the important character on the page. Right, and here we're doing some more reinforcing of the characters, right? This guy's he's more nervous and determined here. Something else I wanted to add was that was important to me, that probably didn't stand out to a lot of people, but I wanted to give him a wedding ring here, because it just adds a little bit more personality. Same with the dialogue. Can't go back to jail, so you know that he was in jail and he has his motivations for doing things. But I wanted to humanize him at least a little bit here. And a scene that comes later has something to do with this wedding ring. But I wanted to give them a chance to show off that they're real people, despite their actions, despite them being the antagonists in this scene. Because this scene is actually inspired by a Spider-Man comic that I was reading. It's part of the Civil War series. But in that comic, you have Spider-Man, and he's standing up on the cityscape, and there's pretty much the similar situation. These gangsters in a car driving, and the police are chasing them, and Spider-Man swoops in and beats up the gangsters, takes control of the car. But those characters, they don't get a personality. They're only there for the purpose of Spider-Man showing off his new suit that Tony Stark made, right? And that's something that I think is important to show, that characters, they're not just background characters. They're characters that have personalities. They're people too. And by giving them a personality, you can heighten the impact of things that happen to them later. And on that note, let's go to the next page. All right, so page 3 is the height of the climax. Oh, well, it's right before the climax of this moment. And because of that, I wanted to have more panels than the previous pages, whereas the previous pages had 3 or 4 panels. This one now has 5 pretty tight panels, and the more panels you have, the faster the pacing of the page. Usually, I mean, there are exceptions, but so the tighter it is, the more pressed in they are, the quicker the moments go by, the more actions that happen, so it makes it feel like it moves faster, All right. So a big thing with this page was that we wanted to focus on the fluidity of the page, right? So coming in, we get these bullet trails just flying off and just forcing your eye, again focusing on guiding the eye throughout the panel, forcing you straight into this new character from the previous page. And now we get a really tight up look on this character, another shot getting to see exactly what she looks like, who she is, and just throwing us into that. Not a lot of dialogue, just a quick moment, not a lot of things going on besides the pretty simple background, just the focus on this character. Coming from that, we get to see a little bit more about the characters, right? So usually if you have bad guys, right, you're not going to humanize them by giving them goofy looks, right? See, this guy, he looks genuinely scared, right? So it makes him a little bit more relatable in this scene, whereas this character looks more like a traditional comic book villain, like just a throw-in character who the heroes are there to stop, right? So I wanted to add just a little bit more humanity to the characters than you would usually see in a comic. And with this, this is kind of a little neat thing that I thought up of. We would have the dialogue balloon here and the gun pointing directly at it, right? So it just gives this character is talking. This is her dialogue, and you have this car racing straight towards her with a gun pointed right at her dialogue. It just gives another sense of confrontation. Now down to these panels. Again, we have James with his bolded dialogue and Carson with none, right? So there's another contrast between the characters, but their dialogue too, it goes to reinforce their characters, whereas James says, look, it's too dangerous, you got to protect yourself, and whereas Carson's like, no, we have to stop these guys no matter what, right? So again, just reinforcing their characters, who they are. That's something that's really important, at least in the start of a story when you're just establishing characters. Carson really pushing himself or his beliefs, and James pushing back. They're having their own argument, whereas Faith's character, this new hero, she is just unsure of herself, right? She doesn't know what to do. She asks a lot of questions, right? If I do this, like, not I'm gonna do this, like, if I do this, and she doesn't even talk in this one. She's not a part of the argument. They're going back and forth, these two characters, and she's just watching. She's waiting for orders, right? So it's starting to establish her character, which is someone who's a little unsure of herself, and you get that from the visuals too, right? She looks worried. She doesn't look as stern or as sure as these two characters are. Another thing, we can talk more about the flow of a page. So this panel especially, there's a few ways to read into this panel. You could come in the dialogue here and read in. You see James' dialogue and get his visual, and then just blast out into the next dialogue from Carson. So James' fists, you follow his fist up into the next dialogue, or you could come in at the dialogue here and follow it down this way and get a bit of a loop into the panel. So you could loop in and read it this way, and either way it works, I think, right? So get out of there, Faith, says James, and then you boom up into the dialogue and back into Carson. Or you could read it there, dialogue, and then you see their reactions, and then back out. And this leg here, goes to thrust us down into the next panel, right? So we see the car coming. The car is coming towards us, and the leg pushes down. So down, forcing us right into her eyebrows, even that guide us out towards the next dialogue, right? So the leg into the eyebrows. Her expression is really emphasized here, right? And that just helps reinforce the order, right? Like, you don't want to go from here down into here, right? You want to go to the next panel. You want to get shown where to go, where to read. You want to guide the reader. This dialogue balloon, then this one, right? So a lot of the times you have people read left to right, top down, right? But this balloon here, it's below this one, but it's to the left of it as well. So it's important that these guiding lines are here to show, okay, we're going this way, up this way. The lines are going up, right? So it shows us we're going up into this one. And if the lines were pointing down this way, if you have a whole bunch of lines like this, then the reading order would be kind of ambiguous, right? So do I start at this top one or do I start at the left one? But since the lines are going up, it shows us which order to read in. All right, so here's the fourth page, and the fourth page is the climax of this scene. So with the previous pages, we had the fast pacing, the lots of panels, and this one, the climax explodes outward into one big splash with some inlaid panels here, and the pacing is slowed way down. It just explodes out into this moment, right? And it looks like the car is frozen in the air, right? It takes a long time to get through this panel because it's so big, right? It takes up the whole page. So it's like in movies where you see like the slow-mo moment, right? So this is what this is meant to be. You see the car flying up into the air, Faith's character facing it, watching, and it's meant to be kind of goofy looking, right? So you have this dialogue here. It's silly, his facial expression, the dog, right? Especially the dog here, right? It's meant to be silly and fun, right? The car's flying in the air. Like that wouldn't happen ever, right? It's not realistic, but it's supposed to be, reminiscent of the goofiness of some superhero comics, kind of like a Spider-Man or a Deadpool sort of thing, right? Where the car's flying in the air. Oh, okay, the hero's got to do something. It's time right now. It's gonna happen. You can see her look. She's decided she's gonna do something here, and then the response by the dog. It's just a silly page, right? But and that's immediately contrasted by the next page, which I'll get into. But first, we have, the explosion effect. You see these lines, they're shooting out. Like it just amplifies everything. It makes it look stylized as opposed to realistic, right? And we have kind of a sense of urgency with this sound effect wrapping around Faith's character, right? She's trapped behind it. She is in between the sound effects and the car, and it gives a sense of urgency. It's now. This is what's it's happening right now in this one moment. Something's going to happen. So here's the next page, page 5, and you can see that it's an immediate switch in tone, right? Immediately from this one, the bright colors, the goofy looks, the sound effects, they're all gone. So in going into this next page, we get a complete tonal shift, right? We go from these blues and bright yellows and kind of more realistic coloring on the car and the characters in the background, to like these purple and like extreme colors and like wildly varying colors, and a more muted palette for this section here, right? So I did this for or the team did this for a few reasons. I keep saying but it's all the art team, and they're genius. So this moment here reflects a change in tone between this page and the previous one. So let me pull them up beside each other. Actually, I think that would be more interesting. Right. So if you can see that these two pages are a complete flip of each other, right? So it's the same image, just flipped over and progressed a little bit. And we even have the same panel layout. And that goes to reinforce a flipping point, right? There's an imaginary line coming down the middle here, right? Oh, it's not showing up. Imaginary line right here that divides these pages into whatever happens before, into the previous pages, and whatever is going to come after, right? So there's, like I said, there's now no sound effects, and there won't be any for the rest of the issue. And the color's more muted here, a little bit more stylized, whereas here it's brighter and kind of more realistic, more goofy at least, more classic comic booky. Whereas here it's a bit more textured. You see the backgrounds where they were airbrushed and glossy and clean. Now they're a bit more grittier. Because all of this, I'm saying all of this because I wanted to emphasize a switch, and you can clearly see that in the visuals, whereas it's a fun scene here to okay, the dog is flying out the windshield here. This is not the happy scene that we thought it might be. And so it's somewhat meant to be a trick on the reader, or but also just a reflection of the change in tone, the more realisticness of the rest of the book, and the attitudes that we want to express. All right, page 6. So with page 6, we wanted to maintain the switch in tone that we set in the previous page with the more muted color set. So you won't be seeing so much the airbrushed looks, more of a painted style, something a little more textured. And that goes to reinforce the tone, whereas you see in like Carson's Fire now, it definitely looks a lot more painted, whereas before it was bright and airbrushed looking. Also, something on a similar note we snapped the panels to align with each other now. Whereas before in the previous pages, they would kind of butt up like this. They wouldn't be perfectly aligned. They would be laid out more freely throughout the page. Some panels like sticking out from each other, but now they're all aligned on a grid because of a few reasons. Because of the tone, because it's no longer in the height of action. We had the climax moment, and now we're winding down from it, right? So we wanted it to be a more calm, more just simple look, so that we don't have that extreme pacing, that extreme style of panel layouts. So something I did, you can you see with the dog here, its dialogue is reflecting its tone, right? So it's all wavy and crooked, and you can see why, right? And it's something that goes to reinforce the general feel, right? Like it's not happy anymore. Like it's a sad moment. It's a sad moment for the character and for the reader. I wanted to show Faith's character, I keep saying Faith's character, I don't know, Faith, she is someone who, she's unsure of herself, like I said before, but she's unsure that what she's doing is the right thing, right? She doesn't know. She wants to be a hero. She wants to help people, but she doesn't know if what she's doing makes her a hero, right? So having this moment, having her cause this, look, she's looking directly at this. Like, this is what she did. This brutal thing to this innocent animal. It impacts her, right? And it goes to reinforce her doubt, something that we'll see later. But this is kind of a major driving force of her character motivation, is that she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know what actions are right. And so she grows to doubt herself and doubt the team. And something like this, a moment like this, where something really terrible happens because of her actions, is something that's really impactful for her. Whereas this new character, Alex, her sister, she's not really concerned with that. She's concerned with her family, with her, with Faith's well-being, and you can still see that the impact it has on Faith, because we take so many panels out. We take a majority of this page just to focus on this one moment. Like, not a lot is happening. We're focusing way slower pacing. Like, whereas before we're jumping back and forth between characters in the car. Now it's just character, reaction, closer look, and it's way slower pacing, and it lets us really absorb the moment and really feel it. All right, page 7. So page 7, things have winded down at this point. We had the previous page with a much slower pacing, and we're going to get a very brief ramp back up, kind of a surprise sort of thing, where you thought it was all over, but there's a quick moment of action once again. And but before that, we have once again a reinforcement of the characters, right? So we're back at James doubting Carson for making that order, that request of Faith, because he doesn't want people to get hurt. He doesn't want to disregard lives at the for the sake of stopping criminals, whereas Carson does, right? Like, and it might seem like too much, like the idea has been reinforced over and over again, but it's something that I think, at least, is important to make obvious to the reader. You don't have to smash them over the head with it, right? Like, I think it's not super subtle, but it's not right in your face. And that you're still establishing characters. We're only page 7. We have how many characters now? We have James, we have Carson, we have Faith, and now we have Alex, right? And that's a lot of characters to be establishing right in the story. So you want to be making sure that the audience is comfortable understanding the motivations of your characters, at least on a simple level. Like, you can make them more complex later, and they will get more complex later. But on the base level now, we know that Carson, we know his motivations, and we know James' motivations pretty clearly. And we have a little bit of irony here in that James is confident in his opinion, and yet at the same time, behind his back, we have the criminal who they're trying to stop, who he's saying will be no better than them if we start disregarding lives. The criminal behind his back is reaching out for the gun, and immediately here comes the wedding ring again, something that was very, very subtle. You probably won't notice without me bringing it up, but I wanted this slight amount of humanity to this character, even one that he seemed more like a background character, someone that is just for the heroes to stop, but I wanted to hint at a bit of humanity that we wouldn't get to see because of his place in this story. We don't get to see what he's like as a husband. We don't get to see that side of him because all the heroes are there to do is stop him, right? They sever that link. They sever it. And I didn't want to, with this moment, like, I didn't want to make a commentary saying like, James, see, you're stupid for saying like that because the criminals don't care. I didn't want it to be like that. I could have had dialogue right after saying something coming from Alex being like, haha, James, see, but I wanted it to be more the audience, let on the reader to say, well, this is what James thinks, and here's what happens, and everyone's silent. No one says anything here, right? We're just watching their characters, watching them react, and the only one saying anything is this character here, howling out in pain, right? And you can interpret that as you want. You can say, okay, well, that means James is wrong, or you can interpret that as, well, Carson's wrong. Like, look at what he did. Him willing to sacrifice anything to get justice. What does that mean? Or what does it mean to want to preserve life? What are the costs of both sides, right? And that's a theme I want to reinforce throughout the entire story, is that I don't want to shove in your face what I think the right answer is. I want it to be more of a discussion than that, and each of the characters, I'm not coming out and saying here's the right answer. Each of the characters has their own inner conflict that they're trying to sort out, right? And again, that moment with Faith, you can see her conflict, right? You can see each one of them has their own reaction. Page 8, the last page of the video. So here we've finished the scene. The scene's over, and we've moved on to a new scene. And you could tell that for a few reasons. One, the color palette switched. So whereas before it was bright blue in daytime, now it's switched to a more, there's a little red overlay of the blue buildings, right? Everything's got a little bit of tint on it, right? And that's just making it super obvious to the reader that we've hit a new scene. The color palette is switched, and even though the location is the same, we can tell that because of the colors, there's been a time difference. And another way to show that off is having this establishing shot. If we jumped straight into a panel like this, maybe you would be able to understand that it's a new scene, but a panel like this establishing a new scene makes it a lot more obvious for the reader that, okay, we're opening it back up into a new moment. Something else in this opening panel is you can see the layers of depth, right? So there's 3 layers to this, or 3 levels to this image. There's the extreme foreground, there's the foreground here. Then there's this middle ground of, here, let me use a different color. Then there's this middle ground, and then everything else is in the background. And that's established through the saturation of the colors. So here, the colors are really, really bright, and they really contrast each other, at least in comparison to, let's say, the background. So you look at the background, and you can see that it looks like it's all almost one color, almost one shade. Like the greens here in this guy's shirt and the and his pants, they don't contrast nearly as much as James' uniform here. And that helps us show that, okay, this is the focus. This is the main attention point of the panel, right? And somewhat in the middle is these two scenes here, Carson and the girls. So things like this help show focus, and they also show depth in a page. A quick other little thing. I used to have this, let me switch back to red. I used to have this dialogue balloon way out here, pointing out this way. But someone pointed out to me that having it out here makes it look like the character's shouting out, right? The long tail makes it look like they're yelling out to the whole crowd, right? Because the balloon is hovering over their heads, so it looks like it's coming a long distance. But this conversation is meant to be something intimate. It's meant to be between these two characters. So having it shorter tail makes it more intimate. Another thing I'm just noticing here, if you zoom in super close, you can see that, I guess it's not quite like that, but there's a bit here. It looks like the lines butt up right against each other. So if you zoom out, back out, it looks kind of like they make up the same shape. They follow the same line, and you generally don't want that with your balloons. So if you look at this one, this balloon here, there's no, all the lines hitting the balloon are hitting it at a perpendicular. So if I had moved this balloon up a bit, and this line on the ambulance lined up exactly with the dialogue balloon, it would look like they're a part of the same shape. And that's not what you want to do with dialogue balloons. You want them to look like their distinct shape, because you don't want it to look like a part of the ambulance. Otherwise it would be confusing for the reader. There's obviously edge cases in which you would want that, but unless you know you specifically want that situation, you want to avoid those tangent lines on arts. Okay, so this moment right here, it's kind of an introduction to the character, introduction to the scene, this dialogue. It doesn't really add anything. It doesn't add to the story to know that Alex likes cookie dough ice cream, right? But it helps, it humanizes her character, because these characters, these heroes, are going to be the main characters of the story. We're going to be seeing them a lot. So giving an intimate moment like this makes us more attached to characters, just like with those drug dealers in the car. Having a small amount of personality or amount of background to them makes you care. It makes you care more, right? And that leads straight into this conversation between the two of them, and we get more about Faith's character personality here, right? So we get why she's having these doubts, right? She doesn't know if she's cut out for the kind of work. That's why she's so doubtful of herself, right? She doesn't know if she's doing the right thing. What happened back there wasn't your fault. But does she believe that? Look, she's looking down. She's still unsure of herself, where Alex is straightforward. She's confident in herself, at least seeming to be, right? And this is where you see the difference in the characters. Faith looks down. Alex looks straight forward. Alex being the more confident personality, and Faith doubting herself, right? and reinforcing this in the foreground, not in focus, because the conversation is still the focus point, but in the foreground we see the dog. Once again, we see what they're talking about, right? What happened back there? What happened back there? This did. This is what they're talking about. And even having Alex smoking here, right? It adds more about her character. It tells us a little bit. She's someone that's a little bit colder to these kind of things. She refuses to let herself be emotionally impacted by it. She's a more stern character, she doesn't really care about what others think. She just cares about her family. She cares about her sister and doesn't care about herself as much. And that's something we'll find out later in this series. But by having her smoking here, we'll see, well, yeah, she doesn't care the effect it has on her. She doesn't care about her well-being. She cares about her sisters. But once again, we have kind of a silent moment here, where we're showing this is what they're talking about. They're talking about the dog, right? This is the moment that really impacted her, right? What happened back there wasn't your fault. The dog, you saw in the previous pages Faith reacting to it being sad, but at the same time we're forgetting about the human that was infected, the person, right? That this man, look, he lost his arm, and they're talking about a dog, right? And does it matter that he got hurt too? What's important here? Like, is he a criminal, so he got what he deserved, and the harm is that the dog was innocent and it didn't deserve it? Or did he not deserve what happened to him either? The book doesn't tell you. It's not in your face about it. It's asking a question through silence, by not saying anything. The question is presented, right? And I don't want to say, yeah, it's her fault that this guy got hurt and he didn't deserve it. Or I don't want to say this guy did deserve it and he got because of his actions, and it's the dog that was innocent, right? I don't want to force either of those on the reader. I want the reader to be able to decide for themselves what they think. So asking the silent question here lets me question the reader without forcing an answer to them. And we see them walking off here into the next scene, which we will pick up with next time. All right, well, that went a lot longer than I expected, but hopefully you got more of an understanding of why we decided to do certain things with the story, or learned a little bit about the comic making process and why certain things are laid out the way they are. If you're interested in more videos like that, then please let me know. I have a few ideas of different things that I want to do, different videos I want to make, but if there's no demand for videos like this, then I'll just move on to those. So please do let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this, if you want me to finish off the entire issue. But once again, thanks to everyone for backing the project so far. It's been amazing, and I just really, really appreciate all your support. Thank you.